Let us begin with something fundamental. Love is not merely a feeling. It's not just an emotional state. It is a profound existential experience, a binding of souls, not merely the alignment of desires. And when we speak of what touches a woman's soul, we're venturing into territory where psychology meets mythology, where biology intersects with meaning. Now consider this. A woman does not fall in love with potential. She falls in love with embodiment. What do I mean by that? I mean she is drawn not to fantasy, but to reality actualized. She is not moved by vague dreams of what a man might become, but rather by the evidence that he is becoming, that he is engaged in the heroic process of transformation. A woman does not fall in love with a man simply because he is handsome or charming. She falls in love when his presence awakens something sacred within her. She's not seeking entertainment, she's searching for resonance. She listens for truth in his voice, not volume. She watches for consistency in his action, not just poetry in his words. She craves the feeling of emotional safety more than the thrill of momentary passion. When a man is anchored in his values, she feels she can anchor herself in him. A woman's soul is not touched by performance, but by the quiet power of authenticity. She knows instinctively when a man's strength comes from a deep inner alignment rather than external bravado. She tests not to provoke, but to discover if the structure of his soul is sound enough to hold the weight of real connection. When he does not waver in the face of her vulnerability, she sees him not as a threat, but as sanctuary. She is moved not by his attempts to impress, but by his ability to remain grounded in discomfort. She wants to see the courage in his eyes when he's uncertain, not just the confidence when he's in control. A woman's soul responds to the subtle force of a man who can lead without overpowering. She is drawn to the rare quality of quiet, patient strength that doesn't need to announce itself. She trusts a man who doesn't chase validation because he's already validated by his own integrity. A woman will fall when she feels the steadiness of a man who does not collapse under pressure, nor flee from emotional intensity. She falls when he is brave enough to confront his darkness and gentle enough not to project it onto her. When he listens to her not to fix her but to understand her, she begins to surrender. She softens when she senses that he is no stranger to pain, but he has chosen not to let it harden him. She falls not for a perfect man, but for the one who is striving toward wholeness. A man whose ambition is shaped by meaning, not ego, ignites the deeper fire in her. When he chooses growth over comfort, discipline over indulgence, she sees in him the promise of stability. She wants to know that his power isn't just potential energy, but kinetic force moving in the direction of purpose. A woman's heart is not captured through control, but through coherence, when what he believes, says, and does are in harmony. She falls when she sees that his masculinity isn't performative, but embodied. A man who carries emotional responsibility like armor and not as a burden makes her feel protected, not imprisoned. She feels safe when his presence says, I've seen the world's darkness and I still choose to bring light. Her soul responds to a man who is building not just a life, but a legacy of meaning. She watches how he treats the invisible, the powerless, the unseen, and it reveals the architecture of his soul. A man who can embrace silence and not need to fill it with noise signals to her that he is at peace within. She falls when his discipline becomes an act of love, not domination. She is stirred when his presence invites her to unfold, not shrink. She is drawn to a man who does not just seek to possess her body, but to understand her essence. She craves not a man who makes her feel like a prize, but one who treats her as a partner in the war against chaos. She finds his flaws forgivable when his self-awareness is fierce and unflinching. She notices when his eyes hold depth because he has wrestled with suffering and emerged wiser, not bitter. A woman falls when she sees he has the courage to apologize and the strength to change. She falls not for a savior, but for a man who can walk beside her without overshadowing her. She senses when a man is devoted to mastering himself rather than conquering others. She admires not the loudest man in the room, but the one who listens so well others feel known. She falls when he builds trust slowly, brick by brick, without shortcuts or manipulation. A woman will open her soul to a man whose actions remain noble, even when no one is watching. She falls for the rare man who can stay calm in chaos because he has faced the storm within. She sees power in restraint, grace in struggle, and beauty in accountability. She connects to the man who knows when to stand firm and when to yield, who is wise enough to tell the difference. A woman is not moved by the man who wants to be worshipped, but by the one who wants to worship truth. Her soul opens when she feels she has encountered a man who has made a vow to reality, not illusion. She trusts the man who doesn't just preach loyalty, but lives it even in the face of temptation. She sees God in a man who chooses humility over pride, sacrifice over self-interest, service over control. She is pulled in by his steadiness, his ability to remain rooted when life is chaotic. She is affected by the man who seeks meaning more than pleasure, who asks better questions rather than seeking quick answers. She is not looking for a man who completes her, but one who complements her journey with integrity and presence. She yearns to be understood, and a man who takes the time to understand himself first is the one who will earn her trust. Her heart opens to the man who doesn't need her to heal him, but invites her into a life of mutual healing. She finds security not in his wealth, but in the wealth of his emotional intelligence and spiritual depth. She will fall deeply for the man who doesn't chase after many women, but chooses her with clarity, not confusion. She needs to feel that she is not just wanted, but honored. When he protects her without controlling her, when he leads without arrogance, when he loves without fear, she gives herself fully. She falls for the man who knows that masculinity is not dominance, but the disciplined stewardship of strength. And when she looks into his eyes and sees that he has chosen to become the kind of man she can trust with her truth, that's when she falls. A woman's soul is not moved by the man who runs from pain, but by the one who walks into it with his eyes open. She is drawn to the man who doesn't deny life's suffering, but chooses to rise in spite of it. She watches how he holds his posture when the world collapses, and how he speaks when fear is loud. She is moved when he doesn't need to control everything, yet still accepts responsibility for what's his. She sees the difference between bravado and bravery, and her heart leans toward the one who's bled quietly. A woman falls for the man who knows the battlefield of the mind and has not surrendered to it. She trusts the man who has buried old versions of himself and still mourned them with dignity. She recognizes courage not by how loud a man is, but by how faithfully he shows up for the silent, unseen battles. She is touched when he doesn't flinch at the chaos she carries, because he's faced worse inside himself. She feels safe with the man who names the void without needing her to fill it. A man who faces chaos doesn't try to fix her, but simply stands beside her while she rebuilds. She is deeply affected by a man who has confronted his shadows and can sit with hers without judgment. He is not shaken by her storms because he's already found the eye of his own. She gravitates toward the man who treats her chaos as sacred rather than shameful. She knows when a man has faced the unknown and returned with wisdom, not arrogance. She finds beauty in the man who uses his scars as maps, not weapons. She respects the man who speaks from his wounds, but does not make them the center of the story. A woman is stirred when a man moves through disorder, not with rage, but with quiet resolve. She knows that courage isn't noise, it's presence under pressure. She doesn't need him to be fearless, but she needs to know he won't flee. She falls when he welcomes her fire without trying to extinguish it. She is magnetized by a man who doesn't see her chaos as a threat, but as a language he's learned to understand. She feels reverence when a man chooses truth over comfort, even when it costs him everything. She's moved when he brings meaning out of mess, not by escaping it, but by engaging it. A woman's soul knows when a man is building order, not for control, but for communion. She watches how he treats the small, the simple, the daily rituals, because they reveal the structure of his mind. Order for her is not about rigidity, but about safety, and she senses that in how he organizes his life. A man who values discipline over distraction creates a life that can hold love without breaking under it. She leans toward the man who honors structure, not to impress, but to serve something higher than himself. She sees depth in the way he maintains clarity in confusion and direction in despair. He doesn't use order to distance himself from emotion, but to create a space where emotion can be safe. She watches how he responds to disorder, because it reveals the level of his self-mastery. A man who builds with intention signals that his love won't drift into chaos. She is moved when he orders his thoughts before he opens his mouth. She trusts the man who takes the architecture of life seriously, who builds not for applause but for legacy. She sees his soul when he brings calm to tension without silencing truth. A woman falls when his leadership is humble and his intentions clean. She knows when a man's sense of purpose isn't manufactured, but earned through fire. When he walks toward challenge without making it about ego, he becomes magnetic. She doesn't need him to be perfect, she needs him to be progressing forward, consciously, purposefully. A man becomes irresistible when his presence speaks of clarity and his silence holds weight. She watches his rituals, his language, his habits. They speak of who he is when no one is watching. A woman recognizes devotion not in grand gestures, but in consistent alignment with truth. She is drawn to a man who doesn't just seek peace, but builds it where there is none. He is attractive when his life is governed by principles, not passing feelings. She falls when she realizes his actions are shaped by a mission larger than himself. And she doesn't want to follow a man, she wants to walk with one who knows where he's going. When his decisions are guided by conscience rather than convenience, she feels honored to stand beside him. She recognizes a man of substance by how he moves in stillness, not just how he performs under pressure. She sees order in how he treats time, attention, and promises. She finds comfort when his stability is not an illusion, but a product of inner discipline. A woman falls for a man who brings order without suppressing creativity. She senses that balance in how he holds paradox, strong yet soft, assertive yet patient, focused yet flexible. She gives her soul to the man who invites her not just into his life, but into his meaning. She is not inspired by a man who wants to impress her, but by one who wants to build something eternal with her. She comes alive when she feels that her presence amplifies his vision rather than distracts from it. She wants a man who sees her not as an accessory to his ambition, but as a co-creator in his destiny. She feels at home when her dreams are taken seriously and her voice is treated as wisdom, not noise. She falls when his goals make room for her growth. She is honored when he doesn't need her to shrink so that he can feel big. She wants to be chosen not out of loneliness, but out of deep discernment and clarity. She trusts a man who doesn't fear her strength, but invites it into the structure of something meaningful. She is inspired when he asks her not just what she wants, but what she wants to build. A woman is moved when a man invites her into truth, not illusion, into purpose, not performance. She falls for a man who isn't afraid to be seen, fully, honestly, and who asks to see her the same. She longs for a connection where both people are striving toward the good, the true, the beautiful. She recognizes alignment when his mission includes her heart, not just her body. She falls when he gives her a place not just in his bed, but in his future. She feels touched when her soul is seen as a compass, not just a complement. She steps fully into love when the relationship becomes a vessel for something greater than emotion. She chooses a man who is building meaning not just in his own name, but in the name of something sacred. She falls deepest when his life whispers, "I have made space for you in the story I'm writing.